You're the president? Bradley's voice cracked as he stared at the silver-embossed business card trembling in his hand. The lobby fell silent. No one moved, no one breathed, as Monique Taylor met his stunned gaze with calm precision. I asked for 5 minutes, she said coolly, but now we're doing this your way. It was a Wednesday morning in Memphis, the kind where the heat clung to the air before noon and the sidewalks glimmered like polished glass. Monique Taylor stepped out of her black Honda Accord, parked discreetly behind the Riverfront National Bank. No valet, no driver, no designer purse or heels to declare power, just a slate gray hoodie, soft black slacks, and a plain leather tote hanging from her shoulder. Her sneakers barely made a sound as she walked across the tiled bank floor. No one turned their heads. That's exactly how she wanted it. The truth doesn't show itself when people think they're being watched. This wasn't a scheduled site visit. There were no briefings or banner greetings. Monique hadn't even told her executive team. She had combed through 3 consecutive months of client feedback, each more troubling than the last. Long-standing commercial clients, the ones Phoenix Equity had personally referred, were experiencing wired fund delays, missed follow-ups, and subtle hostility from branch staff. Nothing loud. Nothing that could be flagged by legal. But Monique knew what coded language looked like. She'd heard it her entire career. And since this particular branch sat just a 15-minute drive from her condo in Midtown, she decided to come in quietly and see the truth for herself. Inside, the lobby was quiet but polished. Cool air hummed through the vents, and the marble counters gleamed with sterile efficiency. A young man tapped on a kiosk near the entry, and 2 tellers chatted softly behind bulletproof glass. On the far side of the lobby, the reception desk sat like a small island, manned by a woman with too much perfume and perfectly lacquered nails. But it was the man standing behind her who caught Monique's attention. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, sleeves rolled just above the wrist to show off an expensive watch he likely thought made him relatable. That had to be Bradley Kane. She'd seen his name on several internal memos, the kind where he CC'd too many people and offered too little substance. His LinkedIn read collaborative banking leader, but the feedback from clients and lower-level staff painted a different story. Still, Monique gave him the benefit of the doubt. For now. She approached the reception with a professional calm that came from decades of boardrooms and balance sheets. "Good morning," she said, her voice low but clear. "Is the branch manager available?" The receptionist glanced at her up and down, hoodie, no makeup, skin tone, and forced a polite smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Monique replied. "I'm with Phoenix Equity. Just a quick drop-in. Should only take 5 minutes." The woman hesitated, then turned to the man behind her. "Brad?" "She's with Phoenix?" Bradley glanced over without much interest. One quick look was all he needed to draw his conclusions. He stepped forward with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ma'am, we're actually quite busy today. If you'd like to leave your card, someone can follow up." He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't ask her name. "I just wanted to speak briefly regarding some recent service feedback," Monique said, her tone still warm. "A few of our commercial clients..." Okay," he interrupted, lifting a hand like he was directing traffic. "So you're with Phoenix? And they sent you, today? Unannounced?" He gave a dry laugh, mostly to himself. "Let me guess, someone upstairs decided we needed a spot check, huh?" He folded his arms and shifted his weight like he'd just been asked to babysit. "What department are you in?" "I oversee client partnerships," Monique said simply. It wasn't a lie. "And this branch in particular has come up a few times. Just thought I'd stop in since I was nearby." Bradley raised an eyebrow. "Well, I'm not sure what kind of checklist you've got, but things are running just fine here. Maybe a few complainers didn't understand our cutoff times. Happens all the time. We're a high-volume branch. Not everyone gets how banking works." His voice had hardened slightly, not aggressive, but confident in a way that assumed she wouldn't push back. "I understand that," Monique replied. But these were longtime clients. Wire delays, missed callbacks, it's not isolated. Bradley's expression shifted. He smirked, almost like she was a child repeating something she didn't understand. I've been in this business over 30 years, he said. Believe me, I know how to separate real concerns from noise. Most of the time it's just someone not liking the word no, even if it's the same clients across 3 months, she asked. With detailed documentation? That seemed to strike a nerve. Bradley's face tightened. Look, he said, his voice low. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to send the unqualified one today, but we don't need random Phoenix employees popping in trying to micromanage our operation. Then, without a hint of shame, he muttered just loud enough for her to hear, figures they'd send the useless one. The lobby stilled. A man standing at the ATM paused mid-withdrawal. The younger teller glanced up sharply from behind the glass. Monique said nothing at first. Her face didn't change. Her breath didn't hitch. She simply reached into her tote and pulled out a slim black card case. She opened it, removed a single business card with her name embossed in silver foil, and handed it to him. Bradley took it, glanced, then looked again. Slowly. The smirk drained from his face. His hand trembled slightly. His mouth parted, but no sound came. Monique Taylor, President, Phoenix Equity Group. I'd like to speak with the regional director, she said, her voice still soft. Today, if possible. Bradley blinked rapidly. Yes, of course, he stammered. I can call Mr. Flint. Right now. He turned without another word and nearly tripped over the receptionist's chair. The staff said nothing, but the silence around them had changed. It wasn't awkward. Anymore, it was electric. Behind her, the young teller, Ava, her name tag read, looked up with something like awe. Monique simply stepped to the side, took a seat in the corner, and opened her notebook. She didn't glare. She didn't sigh. She just waited. Let them sit with it. A few minutes later, she could see Bradley through the glass office doors, phone pressed tight to his ear, pacing in small, nervous loops. His usual confidence had vanished. At one point he gestured wildly, then turned his back to the window. Monique didn't care. She was already making notes, client response delays, staff disengagement, reception blind spots. She wasn't angry. She didn't need to be. She was the report. 10 minutes passed. Bradley still hadn't returned. But someone else had. A soft voice broke the silence. Excuse me. Monique looked up. It was Ava, the junior teller. She looked hesitant but determined. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and her badge hung slightly crooked on her blazer. Sorry to interrupt, Ava said. I wanted to say something. Monique closed her notebook and gave her a gentle nod. Go ahead. Ava glanced toward the hallway, then leaned in just a little. I saw how he spoke to you. And it's not the first time. He talks down to women. To junior staff. Especially if they're not, you know. She didn't have to finish the sentence. I've only been here a few months, but it's been hard. People are scared to say anything. But the way you handled that? Quiet. Calm. Direct. She took a breath. That meant something. Monique didn't say anything right away. She let Ava speak. Let her finish. When she did, Monique nodded. Thank you, she said. You didn't have to come over. But you did. That's not small. Ava nodded. If anyone follows up, I'll talk. There are others too. They're just waiting. Monique smiled slightly. Maybe not anymore. Ava gave a quiet, relieved smile and returned to her window. Monique leaned back in her chair and resumed. Her notes. She hadn't come to be noticed. She came to observe. But in a place that had operated too long in the shadows, her presence had just opened the door to something much brighter. Bradley never returned to the lobby. Not right away. Monique could see him pacing just beyond the glass office door, still clutching her business card like it might spontaneously combust in his hand. From her corner seat, she watched him talking animatedly on the phone, nodding too hard, gesturing toward no one. It wasn't panic exactly, it was realization. The kind of uncomfortable reckoning that comes only after someone's mask cracks and they realize who's really sitting across from them. But Monique wasn't interested in his reaction. Not right now. She flipped another page in her notebook and kept writing, the tip of her pen steady as a metronome. Notes about client treatment. Notes about staff morale. Notes about how a culture like this doesn't break overnight, it rots slowly, from the top down. That's when she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. Ava Martinez, the young teller who had spoken to her earlier, was back. This time she wasn't glancing nervously around the lobby or pretending to organize paperwork. This time she walked straight up to Monique's chair. "Excuse me again, ma'am," she said softly, her voice barely above the hum of the air conditioning. I wanted to ask. Are you planning to talk to someone about what happened?" Monique looked up and met her eyes. "Already started," she replied calmly. Ava hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "If you need anything. If someone calls me, I'll tell the truth. Everyone saw it. But some of us have seen worse. Just never had anyone listen before." Monique nodded, recognizing the weight behind those words. "And now?" she asked. Ava glanced toward the office door where Bradley had finally slumped into a chair, his back turned to the glass. Now might be the right time. The timing, as it turned out, was perfect. 15 minutes later, Bradley reemerged into the lobby looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in half an hour. His tie was loose, and the usual arrogance in his gait had been replaced with something stiffer, more measured. He didn't make eye contact as he said, "Miss Taylor, Regional Director Douglas Flint is available now, video conference, if that works. He's expecting you." Monique stood smoothly, tucked her notebook back into her tote, and followed him down the hall without a word. The conference room was generic, cheap blinds, outdated chairs, but it served its purpose. A large monitor flickered to life as Bradley clicked a few buttons, and moments later, the screen filled with the composed face of a silver-haired man in a tailored blazer and wire-rimmed glasses. "Miss Taylor," the man said warmly, "thank you for joining on short notice. I'm Douglas Flint, Regional Director for the Southeast." "Mr. Flint," Monique replied, taking the seat directly in front of the screen. Bradley stayed standing to the side, hands clasped behind him like a student waiting to be scolded. "I understand there's been an incident this morning," Douglas began. "But more than that, I've heard there may be patterns. I'd like to understand what's really happening at this branch." Monique didn't speak right away. Instead, she opened her notebook and slowly turned it toward the camera, showing a page filled with client names, flagged complaints, and timestamps. "What you're seeing here," she said, "are 3 months of issues. Wire delays, failed follow-ups, missed calls. All pointing back to this branch. And when I arrived today, unannounced, to look into it, I was dismissed, interrupted, and called useless by the manager standing behind me." Bradley's face turned a deeper shade of red. He opened his mouth to respond, but Douglas raised a hand before he could get a word out. "Miss Taylor," Douglas said carefully, "would you feel comfortable if I asked some of the staff to share their perspectives with us? Informally. I believe you may have inspired some honesty we haven't seen before." Monique nodded once. "That's why I came in person." Douglas turned to Bradley. "Please. Step outside and ask Ms. Ava Martinez to join us." The shift in the room was instant. Bradley's jaw clenched, but he complied, walking out with the quiet obedience of a man who knew his control was slipping. A few moments later, Ava entered, eyes wide, her hands clasped together nervously. "Ms. Martinez," Douglas said gently, "I understand you may have witnessed some concerning behavior this morning. You are not under review. We're just listening. If you're comfortable, we'd appreciate your candor." Ava glanced once at Monique, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. Then she spoke. Quiet at first, then stronger. It's not just today, she said. Mr. Kane talks down to staff all the time. Especially younger people. Especially women. Especially women of color. He calls people too sensitive if they speak up. He makes fun of clients behind closed doors, especially the ones who don't look like they have money. A few weeks ago, he laughed when a client with an accent couldn't explain a wire request clearly. Said, figures, they always want something for nothing. Douglas sat very still. Have you documented any of this? Ava hesitated. No. Most of us didn't think anyone would care. But I'm not the only one. Monique spoke gently. Who else might be willing to share? Ava didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. Within 10 minutes, 2 more employees came forward, an assistant manager named Camille Rivers and a customer service rep named Darnell Jacobs. They sat across from the camera, each with their own stories. Camille spoke of being silenced in meetings, of having her ideas rerouted and reworded until Bradley could claim them as his own. Darnell talked about how his shift requests were consistently denied, even as others with less seniority got more flexible hours. I stopped trying, he said plainly. You get tired of being told you're lucky to be here. Douglas listened. He didn't interrupt. And when the final testimony was done, he folded his hands and said, Thank you. You've all been heard. This will not be buried. When the call ended, Bradley re-entered the room like a man walking into a storm he could no longer pretend wasn't coming. I'd like to clarify a few things, he began, but Monique stood. Not now, she said quietly. We've heard enough today. Bradley froze. For once, he didn't argue. Monique turned to Camille as she gathered her things. I'd like to speak with you again. Soon. Camille nodded, her face unreadable but steady. Monique walked past Bradley without another glance, her sneakers silent on the tile. But the echo of what she'd done, of what she'd started, reverberated through every hallway of the branch. By the time she exited the building, a quiet shift had begun. It wasn't loud. It wasn't revolutionary. Not yet. But it was real. In a place where silence had once been survival, voices were rising. And Monique Taylor had just handed them the mic. 2 days later, long before the doors of Riverfront National Bank opened to the public, 2 unmarked sedans rolled quietly into the staff lot. The sun had barely cleared the Memphis skyline, casting long amber streaks across the sidewalk, but already the tone inside the building was different. The whispers had begun the moment Monique Taylor walked out of the branch earlier that week. Staff members had felt it in their bones, something had cracked open. And now, the ripple was reaching every corner of the institution. The 2 individuals who stepped out of those sedans weren't here for small talk. They wore dark suits, carried clipboards, and introduced themselves as internal auditors from Phoenix Equity's Compliance Division. They didn't need to raise their voices. The presence of truth has its own gravity. One by one, employees were called into a back office and asked simple questions: how long they'd worked here, what they'd seen, what they hadn't said until now. And one by one, the stories began to pour out like water from a broken pipe. Some were quiet confessions. Others came with tears. But they all had a thread in common: a culture of fear, favoritism, and quiet dismissal. A culture that hadn't started overnight, but had gone unchecked for too long. And at the center of that culture was Bradley Kane. The auditors didn't speak much. They just listened. Took notes. Cross-referenced timesheets, incident reports, and client complaints. They left by late afternoon, saying little more than thank you for your honesty to each person they interviewed. By the following morning, Bradley Kane's office sat dark. A notice on the inside of the glass read, on administrative leave pending review. He hadn't returned. He wouldn't. Camille Rivers saw the paper first. She stood frozen in the hallway, half expecting it to be a mistake. But when the regional HR representative walked in and asked her to step into the conference room, she knew. She sat down with her back straight, her voice calm, and accepted the interim branch manager assignment without blinking. She didn't need a title to lead, she'd already been doing it in the quiet. Now, the title had simply caught up to the work. 2 weeks later, Monique returned. Same time of day. Same outfit. Same quiet entrance through the front lobby. No driver. No fanfare. Just her and her leather tote, slung casually over her shoulder. But this time, when she stepped inside, the energy had shifted. Not in a forced, artificial way, but in something softer, steadier. The staff didn't scramble or pretend not to notice. They met her eyes. Some even smiled. A junior teller stood a little taller at her station. The receptionist straightened her shoulders. Monique didn't say much. She walked past the reception desk and toward the newly cleaned glass doors of the manager's office. And standing in front of them, clipboard in hand, was Camille. The moment their eyes met, Monique smiled. "I heard you've been busy," she said. Camille returned the smile, this time not with hesitation, but with assurance. "Come on in. I'd like to show you what we've been working on." Inside, the blinds were open. Sunlight poured in through the windows. A corkboard behind the desk had been transformed, no longer cluttered with corporate posters but now lined with team ideas, color-coded notes, and post-its with suggestions from tellers and clients alike. "We started a rotating mentorship schedule," Camille began, gesturing toward the board. "Senior staff pairing with newer hires once a week. Ava's been leading it. She's brilliant, by the way." Monique nodded, taking it all in. "Client response times?" she asked. "Down by 28%. Missed callbacks?" "We implemented a follow-up tracker. And we built out a shared internal dashboard to monitor transfer timelines. Nothing fancy, just practical." Camille didn't speak with flash. She spoke with facts. With solutions. With the quiet confidence of someone who had always known how to lead, if only given the room to stand tall. Monique listened intently, asking a few questions, but mostly observing how Camille spoke, how she carried herself, how the air in the room seemed lighter now. "You've done all this in 2 weeks?" Monique finally asked. Camille gave a modest shrug. "It helps when people feel like their voice matters." There was a pause. The kind of pause filled with mutual understanding. Then Monique reached into her tote and pulled out a slim folder. She slid it across the table. Camille opened it slowly. Inside was a formal offer, permanent branch manager, full authority, Phoenix Equity endorsed. Camille looked up, her eyes wide for just a moment before softening. "I don't know what to say." "You've already said it," Monique replied. "With your work." Then, after a beat, "But I do want to leave you with something my grandfather once told me. He served in World War II. Came home, took a job at the post office. Carried himself like a king even when the world treated him like an afterthought. He used to say, 'Silence isn't weakness, it's the wind-up before the swing.'" Camille let those words settle deep in her chest. "He sounds like someone I would have liked to know." "You'd have learned a lot from him," Monique said, rising from her chair. "But I think he'd be just as proud of what you've done here." They shook hands, not as executive to subordinate, but as two women who had earned their places in the room. As Monique stepped back into the hallway, the atmosphere felt brighter, like the branch had shed a heavy skin. Ava spotted her from across the lobby and offered a quiet wave. A young man at the customer desk gave her a nod of respect. They weren't treating her like a mystery anymore, they were treating her like something else. A standard. Outside, the sky had shifted from morning gold to early afternoon warmth. Monique slid into her car and paused for a moment before starting the engine. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt grounded. This hadn't been about putting someone in their place. It had been about pulling everyone else into the light. Leadership isn't a title. It's how you move when no one's looking. How you show up again, and again, and again, until showing up becomes a culture. And Monique Taylor hadn't just changed one branch. She had sparked a quiet revolution. One that would ripple outward long after the doors of Riverfront National Bank swung shut behind her. What happened at Riverfront National Bank wasn't about one dramatic confrontation or a single act of disrespect. It was about something deeper, something that resonates far beyond a Memphis branch and into workplaces, boardrooms, and communities across this country. At its core, this story is about dignity, quiet leadership, and the power of showing up with intention, even when no one expects it. Monique Taylor didn't walk in demanding attention. She didn't flash a title or throw her weight around. She listened first. She observed. And when the moment came to act, she moved with clarity and purpose. That's the kind of leadership we don't talk about enough, the kind that doesn't yell to be heard, but speaks when it matters most. One of the most important lessons here is this: true leadership isn't about making noise, it's about making impact. You don't need a corner office or an engraved nameplate to create change. Sometimes, all it takes is speaking the truth when everyone else is silent. Sometimes, it takes showing people that respect isn't earned by rank, but by how you treat others when you think no one's watching. We also saw the quiet courage of people like Ava and Camille, individuals who had been underestimated for far too long. All they needed was a signal that it was finally safe to speak. When Monique created that space, their voices filled it with truth, and that truth became the foundation for something better. And to those who, like Bradley Kane, have grown too comfortable on the wrong side of power, this story is a mirror. If your leadership makes people small, it's not leadership at all. It's fear wearing a suit. And sooner or later, someone will walk through the door and remind you of that. So my advice to every listener is this: don't underestimate the impact of integrity, patience, and showing up with quiet strength. You never know who's watching, who's learning, or who's waiting for the courage to follow your lead. And to those who feel overlooked or silenced in their workplace or community, remember this: your voice matters. Your value isn't diminished by someone else's inability to see it. Keep showing up. Keep standing tall. You never know when the moment will come where your presence shifts everything. On behalf of the channel, U.S. Instructive Stories, thank you for spending time with us today. If this story moved you, made you reflect, or reminded you of something you've lived through, we encourage you to share it. These aren't just stories, they're lessons, reminders, and conversations that need to be heard. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories that reveal powerful truths behind everyday moments. And remember, sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one leading the change.